and welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. Today, I'm very excited for the project I have for y'all. I've been dreaming about this project ever since I saw this pair of overalls. Today, we are going to make a pair of rainbow faded glory overalls from the 70s that I really adore, but anytime these go on the market, they're like $300 upwards, and usually not my size, and I have particular waist to hip ratios that can make overalls a smidge tricky, and I'm really unwilling to spend that much money not knowing if they fit. All right, this is slightly future Haylee popping in because I just got permission to use photos from one of my favorite 1970s shops of these overalls. She is the first shop that I ever saw these overalls on, so let me real quick, I need to bring them up for my reference. Two Dead Gals, she is actually local to Seattle, which is always fun too. But she's the first shop I ever saw these rainbow overalls on, and the second I saw them, I knew I had to make them. This is like my attempt to make my own, so that way they're an accessible thing for me, and then they fit perfectly and exactly the way I want. But definitely check out her page for really amazing 1970s vibes. She finds the coolest 1970s pieces, and I like constantly find her page inspiring. I'm gonna pop in the image that I'm gonna use from her shop that I'm using as reference photos. I am also using a couple other reference photos to get the back of the overalls, but that is kind of the scoop. This is what they look like, and I'm so excited to make these dream overalls of mine. We're gonna go ahead and hop back to past Haylee now. I'm gonna finally make them because I think the best way for me to have them and have them exactly the way I want is for me to make them myself. I have my supplies back here. I have this pattern here. I've used this pattern on this channel before on a pair of my very first pair of overalls, actually November, October. I can't quite exactly remember when I made these, but I absolutely adore this pattern. I've used this pattern a ton, so I think it's a good one for me to modify because I'm already really familiar with it. One of the biggest tricks of this is going to be modifying the bib because the bib is round and then has like a little round pocket. So I'm gonna have to figure out all that, and this is gonna be like, I'm basically using the pant base of this and then changing the bib. That is the plan. So I'm gonna basically, I think, have to draft my own bib, which is no big deal, but it is something I have to do. For the embroidery thread, I got this confetti Egyptian cotton thread. I got this at the Sew Expo I went to a couple weeks ago, and this was what they recommended when I explained the project I was doing, and it was nice because all the colors came together. I think I'm not going to use the pink or probably the teal. I'm going to stick to like a very classic 6 rainbow. I need to like re-look at my reference photos to check that that's right, but I think 8 colors is going to be too many rows to stitch everywhere that it needs to. And then for the, excuse me, Spooky says hello. Here she is, looking out the window at the burbs. And then here, I'm gonna use this really blue denim because I just really like this blue denim. I think it's really nice. Don't do it. You can jump. I believe in you. You can do it. Nice. So this is some denim I picked up in Italy. I have more than enough for the overalls here. I have like 5 3/4 yards. I plan on making a pair of overalls with these and then probably a denim skirt and a pair of pants. So this is gonna go a long way, but for today we're just using it for the overalls. I chose it because of how blue it is. I think the blue is really nice here. You can do it. Nice. That is the plan. I'm so excited. I've been dreaming about this project ever since I saw that pair of overalls, and I now have the confidence to accomplish it. I'm probably going to walk you through things a little bit less granular when it comes to the pants because I do have a full video on those, but I will walk you really granularly through the bib and the embroidery since that's going to be the tricky part of this project. But I'm really excited. I am not particularly experienced with embroidery, so I'm really excited at the prospect of just getting to push myself a little bit on a detail. And of course, I'm machine embroidering. I do not hate myself enough to embroider denim by hand. I'm feeling very excited about this project. I've been working my way through my dream projects lately, and it's been really fun because a lot of these are projects I've had in my brain for like the last couple years, and I just now feel confident enough to finally take them on. Let's go ahead and hop into, I guess, the creating of the bib pattern because that's what I'm going to need to do. So my first step here is to round out the bib. So first I'm starting just by a simple tracing before using some tools to go ahead and get that curve I want. This is supposed to kind of curve like a rainbow at the top, and so that is what I am trying to achieve here, which I do using the lid of a cottage cheese container that I have hoarded in my Tupperware cabinet. I made a couple different lines. I ended up cutting it on the inner rounded line because I went to look at like photos of the bib and the bib itself of the the overalls I've already made from this pattern and realized the wider one that I drew would be too wide without having darts in it to shape it. So I cut it on the inner one that you see. And then just some quick other alterations I made. You can see these are also with tracing paper, both the pants pieces. I just felt like as far as like the crotch seam, I could use an extra 3/4 inches. So I traced the pattern and then I did a slashed and spread method like the pattern recommends. This just adds an additional little bit of comfort for these overalls and flexibility. And then I cut 2.5 yards off of my block of 5 3/4 yard fabric to work with because that's about how much I would need. And I laid out my pieces. It was very important here with the pant pieces to pay attention of the stretch. This has a one-way stretch in it, which I am not particularly great with stretch fabric, so I was a little bit nervous about that. But once I got the pieces laid out, I just started cutting. I chose to use a different pair of cutting scissors than usual because I've read that you should actually, for heavy fabrics, have a specific pair of scissors and not dull your scissors you use for like thinner fabrics. So that is what I'm doing here. I don't know if that's actually factually accurate, but that is what I am doing. Towards the end, it was definitely a little bit trickier of a cutting job just because this denim, when I had stored it folded in half, got just like kind of a crease in it that the dye seems to have settled into kind of weird. So I am trying to avoid having that cut across any major pieces of the overalls, so that did make piecing this together a little bit more complicated, and then ended up putting it so not everything is exactly on the same stretch on the bib part, which I think will be okay long term, but it definitely was not a great experience to sew with. And then here I am doing the prep the night before of winding all 6 of the rainbow bobbins, so that way tomorrow I can just focus on sewing with them. I just don't super love winding bobbins, so I thought I would get kind of the sewing chore over and done with. Kid, stop that. All right, good morning. I am ready to start, officially doing things, sewing today. We're now back on daylight savings time, so I can sew a little bit later in the day. It is about 10:15 right now. My main goal is just to sew as much as I can today because I only have today this weekend to sew and like have a big sewing day, and so I need to kind of get as much done as I can. However, with daylight savings, I now have more time, to work on it after work. I swear she's only ever interested in plants on camera. It's very obnoxious. Spooky. No, don't do it. She's literally, I don't know if you can tell that she's hitting it with her tail and all the little berries are going everywhere and it's a lot. So yeah, that is the plan for today, is just sew as much as I can. I have all my meal prep done. Spooky though might want a lot of attention today from what I'm gleaning here. Oh, I haven't fed you yet. That's what's going on. Okay. I'll feed her right after this and then I'll hop into the sewing. Here I am picking through my sewing needles because I know I need embroidery needles and denim needles, and I'm going to be switching between the two in this project, which is not my favorite. I'm starting with the embroidery needle to just test the stitch and figure out exactly how I want to sew these rainbow stitches. So the overalls I'm referencing actually is a chain stitch, but you need a special machine for that. So I'm just trying to figure out an alternative stitch that I like. I ended up just going with a really tight zigzag stitch. Here, what you can see me doing is I had it a little bit wider, and then I'm slowly narrowing it to get it to the thickness that I want, and testing that it works okay on this denim. Here I make a mistake because I am going on the one way that does not have stretch on these, and I will be sewing on the stretch, which was a problem. But before we get to that problem, I'm first doing some prep on the denim that I will need to embroider. I'm trying to embroider things together as much as possible because I will have to change the thread 6 times every time I do a rainbow, and so I'm trying to do that as little as possible. So for this first batch, I have the pockets, the straps, and the bib, and then the second round I will have the front bib pocket because I will need to do the rainbows first, and the third I will be doing the actual legs of the jeans. So here I am prepping the straps by just folding them in half and getting them all ready to sew. And then here I am just sewing those. So far, the stretch denim is forgiving me and it has not been too bad. And then as always, I am just clipping those edges before turning this inside out. I've gotten much faster at turning these things inside out since last time I did this pair of overalls. And then I'm going ahead and putting in a basting stitch around the edge of the bib where the actual seam will be, so that way I know where to place my rainbow embroidery. This also works as stay stitching, so it's not a bad idea anyway. And then I'm also doing the 2 rows of top stitching, or I guess 4, 2 on each side of the straps. So that way, again, I can place the rainbows accordingly. And then here I am changing both the needle and the thread to start my rainbow stitching. I'm moving obviously to the embroidery needle, and then I am also going to be moving to embroidery thread that's red. And here's where the stretch denim got me in trouble. As you can see, this top line is really wavy because of the stretch of the denim. I ran real quick to Joann's to get some water soluble sulky because I don't want this to stay in, and the tear off isn't going to work for this. And that second row you can see is with the sulky, and that definitely works way better. So this was worth it, but I was not happy to make a Joann's trip. And then I am cutting pieces of this sulky that then I just have to press to adhere onto each piece that they belong. And I'm only doing a band just wide enough for all the embroidery. The embroidery should stay under 1/2 inch from the edges, so we still don't see any weird stretching. This worked well enough. I got medium. I probably should have gotten heavy, but the medium was $30 and the heavy was like 40 or 50 or something wild like that. So I went with the medium weight, but I think I maybe should have gone with the heavy. And then for the bib, I'm doing the same thing, but it's just going to be kind of more patchy and weird, which I think is totally okay. And now we're finally to the embroidery part. This was trickier than I expected. It's not like it was undoable, but I definitely have tons of visible mistakes in my embroidery. Sometimes it would get stuck and start to kind of like build up underneath. I just definitely had a learning curve with the presser foot and moving it through and all that. The easiest pieces were the straps, which is what you're seeing here. The bib is where I definitely had more problems. First of all, I was going around corners with stretch denim. The stabilizer that I used definitely helped this. I can't imagine having done it without, but there's definitely places where the embroidery just like isn't as dense or breaks up or builds up or do other weird things, which I will try to show you guys at the end of this video. I'm sure you will be able to see it from pretty far away in some cases. Even with the stabilizer, like here you can see I had a hard time starting the pocket, so there's weird thin patches of embroidery. I had to really learn not to push my fabric through the machine at all, but literally just let the feed dogs do their thing and keep a close eye. This was just definitely very different from any other type of sewing I've done. But once I finished with the red, it was time to swap out and start with the orange. This was quite the process getting all these colors on here. And then, of course, after the orange was the yellow, and then here I am doing the green around the bib. The bib was just by far the hardest because I was having to curve, and the curves change according to how far inward they are. So this was just very interesting and perhaps not the funnest. And then here, after I think 2 hours, I finally made it to the blue. And then last was, of course, the purple. As you can see, it looks amazing on the straps. These were by far the easiest to do because they were the thickest and most stable pieces of fabric. The next thing I did was cut the pocket out of a piece of paper in the shape I wanted, and then found some fabric I could actually sew it with. It was a little bit tricky to find a piece of fabric big enough, but I made it do. I was determined not to cut any more yardage of fabric for this. And then here I am actually washing off the sulky. As you can see, very water soluble. So I'm just basically drenching and soaking and getting all of that sticky residue off. I hated how sticky this felt. This was a sensory nightmare for me. And then I definitely didn't take good footage of this, which my apologies for that. I ended up basically drying these by first doing my towel pressing method, and then after that I just basically ironed the rest of the moisture out of it. Is that questionable? Probably, but I wanted to keep moving on this project and felt like to do that I needed to do this because I really need to take my sewing machine into the servicer. It's just starting to run a little bit weird from all the different projects I've run it through on the last few months. So I'm trying to get this done to get my sewing machine checked in before I go out of town for a couple weeks where I won't miss my sewing machine. And then after I have those all done, I am switching out the thread and the needle again back to the denim needles because I'm going to start sewing other elements together. So here I am changing all the different parts on the machine that need to be changed. And then after that, I'm doing the prep on the pockets, which is the top stitching along the tops of the pockets. The instructions only have you do it single, but I like to do it double so it matches all the seams everywhere else on these overalls. And then here you can see I am pinning the bib pocket on. The shape I drafted looks really, really great. It is not completely even, but I can live with that. These, at the end of the day, I use overalls for like pottery or just working like in the yard. Like I use overalls to be kind of more, I mean, I like it when they're pretty, but I also like them being functional. Also at this point in time, I realized I was a fool and marked my pocket placements with disappearing ink last time. That just disappears after about like 20 minutes. So I have to remark them here, which is what I'm doing. You can definitely see there's still some weird bubbling and stretching that happened with the embroidery, but it is much better than if I didn't use that sulky stabilizer. And then again, here I am doing that double top stitch look on the edges of the pockets. Since this is the bib, I'm only doing it up and down. The bottom will be sewn when I sew the pants to it, but that is what I'm doing here. These are looking really great, and despite the flaws that I'm already seeing, I know I'm going to be really happy with the final product. And then I am again repeating this on the pant pocket. And then I'm continuing to go along. I am putting the bib facing onto the bib. In the past, when I've made these overalls, I've had the facing be a different fabric, but because of the stretch hem, I thought it would be good if the lining stretched a different way than the top, so that way they would maybe stabilize each other. Maybe that's completely wrong. Let me know in the comments. I mean, if I am completely wrong, please be nice about it, but I'm always happy to know when I'm wrong. And I am also starting to do the prep for the pants here. Here I am sewing down the inner leg seam like the instructions tell me to. After sewing the bib, I am clipping all my curves and pressing them and getting them ready for me to top stitch down around the edges, which is again what I am doing here. Is I am doing that double top stitch that's everywhere else here for consistency's sake. However, unlike other places, some places the red embroidery is too close to the edge, so I'm actually putting that second line along the red embroidery instead of the even, I think 3/8 of an inch it is everywhere else in this project. And then for these pants, I am doing the fake felt seam I did for the overalls the first time I made them. You can check that out in that video for like the longer process, but quick summary, I cut down one of the sides and I fold one of the seams over and press it and sew it down, and that is what you see here. The next step here is to sew the crotch seams together, or I guess the crotch and the butt seams together. So that is what I'm doing here. And here I am also doing the facing that goes in the back of the jeans where the straps are. So here I'm just doing the edge finishing for the piece. And then I am also sewing that seam that you saw me pin for the butt and the crotch. This was pretty straightforward. I was a little bit nervous because of the stretch in these, but this ended up going just fine without a hitch. And the facing was ready to be attached to the back. And with that, the bib was ready to attach to the front. It is Sunday before I am gone all day, so I am trying to get some done. The lighting isn't great because it's in the morning, but what I'm trying to show you here is how I marked the line for the first line of embroidery, which I just did using yellow chalk and a quilting ruler. This is important because I need a guide for the embroidery that goes down the leg. And the reason I didn't do this embroidery earlier is because it needed to play off exactly where it sat on the bib, and I didn't want to figure out how to do that until the bib was sewn off. So that is everything that you are seeing here. And then after that, I am doing a quick application of, again, that sulky backing. I thought because this did not go with the stretch lines, I wouldn't need this, but after doing a quick patch swatch test, it was clear that I was going to have to do this. So again, I am just laying that down. I hate this stuff. I would really like to not use it, but on this fabric, it just isn't an option. And then from here, I start to tackle all the colors of the rainbow, starting with red and then orange, and then yellow, green, blue, and purple. This took a long time. This was, I think, almost 3 hours of embroidery. It was not my favorite. Here is your mid-video reminder that if you enjoy the work I do on this channel, you can buy me a cup of coffee over on Ko-fi. As you can see, I put a ton of work and effort into these projects, and I always really appreciate it when I get that support over on Ko-fi. Also, to wrap up this day's work, I got all the rainbow stitching in, which was the goal, and then I washed away the sulky and I left them to hang to dry overnight so I could start this the next evening after work. I really wanted to get this all done today, but the embroidery made that not an option. The first thing here that I am tackling this next morning is the side seams. These are not very fun to do. Again, you can see the full process on my other video where I made these overalls, because basically why they aren't that fun is because the felted seams are really hard to do because it's hard to push that much material around. So that is the main struggle with these. And then my next step here, if my hand would get out of the way, is me putting in the zipper. And then with the zipper in, I could do a quick try on and determine where the hem would be. This is just going to be a simple double turn hem down at the bottom that's fairly narrow. I left these overalls much longer than the other two pairs I've made with this pattern because as I've worn the other two pairs, I have wished that they had about like an inch and a half extra hem. And here, what I am finally doing is I am doing all the hand stitching. I just have to stitch the facings down. This actually is very minimal hand stitching for a project. And then I have to stitch the buckles closed. But after that, I am all done and we are ready for the reveal. Hello, it's me. I'm still in my reveal outfit. I just wanted to pop in to give you some context on what filming a reveal looks like for me. I drive around a bunch of neighborhoods until I find what I feel like is the perfect setting. I knew the daffodils were blooming over in the park by the zoo, so that is where I headed. I think some of you have asked like how publicly I am doing these, and I thought it would be fun because this is probably one of the more public ones I've done, but I'm used to like being stared at. Let me put in a little bit of footage, but one of the shots I was taking was right at the corner by where a stoplight was, so cars would line up and like stare at me, and it was like super awkward. And then people would walk by in the background with a crosswalk. I've always tried to be not annoying to people when I am filming a reveal. The beginning of my channel, I didn't feel comfortable enough and I did most of my reveals inside my apartment, but now I am older and care less, I guess. So I do go out in public and I've just gotten used to the stares and they don't really bother me. I mean, to say they don't really bother me is not accurate. I feel incredibly uncomfortable, but I know the end product will be worth it enough that I can deal. And the other thing that was really fun during this photo shoot is I guess one of the schools nearby must not have like a recess play area, so they come to the park by the zoo. So as I'm like taking our footage, I had probably like 30-40 children walking by staring at me, and children are scary. I don't super love children, so that was not a great experience for me. I feel like it's just helpful for you guys to see some of the behind the scenes work that I put into this channel, and one of them is reveals. We are entering my favorite time to film reveals, which is springtime, because spring in Seattle is one of the biggest reasons I live here. I live for spring in Seattle. It is so beautiful. There's so many different flowers. I absolutely adore it. So hopefully you enjoy these reveals and enjoy this little peek behind the scenes. Now we're going to cut to the normal part of the programming. Now we are going to get into the cost breakdown and the wrap up. I have my spreadsheet here. So let's hop into it right off the bat. Fabric was $25 because it was 2.5 yards of fabric that I put around $10 a yard. I know I picked it up for €8 a yard, and so because of the euro dollar conversion changing all the time, I just rounded it up to 10, called it good. So that is $25. And then notions were the most expensive part because of the embroidery thread on this. Notions, the total was $55.72. That is $5 for the sulky because I didn't use the whole roll. The whole roll was $15. And then the zipper, thread, overall buckles, all that is $5.92. And then the colorful embroidery thread that I used was $44.80 because I got cotton nice. Okay, I have to check what Spooky's doing. Something wild is happening. Never mind, she's just ripping into a paper bag I gave her to rip into. I'm being dramatic. Anyway, because that thread was so expensive, I will link that thread in case you're curious. I thought it was nice. I do not have a good judge of an embroidery thread though, for the record. And then the pattern was only $11.03 because it is a third of what I actually paid for the pattern, because this is the third time I've used this pattern. I really like the overalls that come from this pattern, so yep, this is my third round. So that brings me to a supply total of $91.75. I feel really good about this. Like, the vintage overalls are like $300-400, and then McCall, I think, which I wouldn't want to support anyway because I don't think their labor practices are up to snuff. Theirs are around like $89 or something like that. So this isn't that much more money for something I made myself in exactly the way I wanted. So yeah, I feel pretty pleased with that price. As far as labor goes, we always go into that breakdown. These took me 14 hours. I can basically attribute, I would say, at least 6 of these hours to the embroidery and the pattern alterations, because in the past, when I've made these overalls, they've taken me somewhere between 7 and 8 hours. The embroidery just took a really long time on this, and I of course was making some additional pattern adjustments, so that's what like added on that extra amount of time. So yeah, with that total of 14 hours times $32.70, which is a living wage here in Seattle, that would be $457.80. In labor, again, just like a reminder that like I'm not comparing apples to apples. This would take that many hours to make in a factory. Of course, they have better tools and more efficiencies. However, I still would say, like, if somebody was to open a clothing making factory in Seattle, $32.70 should be what they pay a worker, because that is what a living wage is here. Obviously, like, according to where you live, living wage might be lower or even higher. And I just think it's really important to talk about what a living wage actually costs. So with paying myself a living wage plus the supplies, we get a total of $549.55. I mean, these are a custom pair of overalls with 6 hours of embroidery work done. Machine embroidery, but embroidery nonetheless. I would also say like I was a less efficient embroiderer because this is my first time ever really messing with embroidery on my machine. Definitely opening up some new and interesting opportunities. Probably not the most efficient that I could have been. Also, if you were just using one color of embroidery thread, it would work better. Or, you know, you could have that fancy computerized machine that just embroiders while you do other things, which would be fantastic. That is not... I could probably actually buy one of those machines. However, I don't have space. It's not a great option for me. These are my final pair of overalls that I made. I'm so happy with these. They're super fun. So the embroidery on this, we're just, I guess, gonna go into the flaws right off the bat, and then we're gonna talk about what I love about them. I learned later that I could like re-go over the embroidery again to get it the correct thickness everywhere. And I would have definitely done that on the bib had I known it before the bib was fully assembled, as well as the pocket. The embroidery quality on this isn't fantastic. My lines are not particularly straight, and the thread density is not particularly even, but I'm totally okay with that. This was my first try at this, and I don't expect myself to be perfect, and from far away it still looks really good. Ultimately, like, people who look at this aren't going to be looking at it super close up and judging like my lack of embroidery skills. People are just pretty shocked that I made something like this. So when I do talk about my mistakes, I'm always just telling you them so you know that there are things that I did that were not perfect, because that is true for every garment, and they're things that probably nobody would notice. Another thing is I don't love how the zipper sits. I think I might have stretched the fabric around here too much or something, but the zipper is not set in perhaps the best. But otherwise, these are made really well. All the seams are really clean. They're gonna get their first wash already, because in proper fashion, I christened these with a white spot on the pant leg that looks like powdered sugar, but I didn't eat powdered sugar today, so I have no idea what that spot is. I did have some Oreo dipper things that were tasty, and maybe that's what I got in them. I love this shape. This is a very like fun shape. I do think if I was like to make these again, I would actually round it even more so it's even more of like a rainbow shape and has a little bit less of that square distance in the middle. However, the square distance does equal a pretty big pocket, which I do love. I used the pocket a bunch today at work. It was fantastic. I was able to sneak off with some extra snacks. I probably shouldn't say that, but I snuck off with some extra snacks that I could hide in this sucker here. I like these leg length. So the biggest thing is I am definitely ready to not use this pattern for a little while. I love this pattern, but there's some like downsides to really big, thick, swishy pant legs. And one is that like the overalls don't stay on my body when I go to the bathroom. My other pairs of overalls are tight enough to my legs that I don't have to hold them off the ground. And these ones I do, unfortunately. I do think this like type of leg just makes me look really tall, which I love because I'm not. So it's like pros and cons, but I'm definitely ready to try just a few different other overall patterns. I bought a few and so I'm ready to see which ones I really like. My best embroidery and the stuff I'm proudest of is the straps. The strap seam embroidery is pretty straight and even and great, and I am very pleased with that. And I also feel like this pocket, which was one of the later pieces that I did, I really had the hang of it, and I'm just really overall very proud of these, and they're a super fun thing to wear. I get lots of compliments on them, and then they're just like fun for me to wear because I love rainbows and I love overalls, and this has both. And it was so fun to remake a pair of overalls I have stared at and wanted and coveted for a few, probably a few years in this exaggeration, but I think at least a year. Again, thank you for Two Dead Gals, which I will link her Instagram shop down below, for letting me use her photos. Again, check her out, especially if you're looking for that 70s aesthetic. She gets lots of great pieces in, and even if they aren't in your size, they're great inspiration for sewing. But other than that, we can kind of wrap it up. I think Spooky's gonna come say hello. Yes, she is. Spooky says hello and goodbye, and I say goodbye as well. As always, you can support me over on Ko-fi by buying me a coffee. It always really helps me out as I put a lot of effort into this channel. What else do we say, Spooky? You can support us for free by leaving a comment or liking this video and sharing it with friends. And then, of course, if you are new to this channel, I would love you to subscribe and stick around. I have some great projects coming up, and I will see you all next time. Bye!